The Battle of the Atlantic was not merely a struggle between steel ships and silent submarines. It was a war of endurance, a test of industrial strength, and above all, a war of intelligence. By early 1943, the Allies were losing that war. German U-boats, operating in coordinated packs across thousands of miles of open ocean, had perfected a deadly art: the interception and destruction of Allied convoys bringing fuel, ammunition, food, and soldiers across the Atlantic. Without these supplies, Britain could not continue the fight. Without them, the invasion of Europe would never happen. The stakes were absolute. And as winter settled over the North Atlantic, the situation grew more desperate with each passing week. By February 1943, the German Navy believed victory was close at hand. Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the U-boat arm, oversaw a vast and increasingly sophisticated fleet. His captains were experienced, aggressive, and equipped with what he believed to be an unbreakable secret weapon, the Enigma cipher machine. Every night, Donitz sent encrypted messages to his submarines, messages that directed their patrol routes, coordinated their attacks, and reported Allied convoy movements. Each morning, his U-boats responded with their own secure transmissions. These orders, encrypted with daily changing keys, allowed dozens of submarines to operate as a single organism, striking with precision and vanishing before escorts could respond. The system appeared flawless. The Allies, Donitz believed, were blind. What he did not know was that in an unassuming English estate called Bletchley Park, mathematicians, linguists, and engineers had been quietly working to unravel Enigma for years. Their progress was uneven, their breakthroughs rare, and the German Navy's use of the machine, especially its Fragment variant for U-boats, was far more secure than the Army and Air Force systems. But despite these challenges, the cryptanalysts persisted, knowing that any window into German communications, however brief, could alter the course of the war. On February 18, 1943, such a window unexpectedly appeared. At a remote British listening post overlooking the grey waters of the North Sea, a wireless operator heard the faint, rapid-fire clicks of Morse code. The pattern was unmistakable, an Enigma message. But almost immediately, the transmission cut off. Perhaps the U-boat had submerged, or its antenna had iced over, or the operator had made a mistake. Whatever the cause, the message was incomplete. A fragment, a puzzle missing half its pieces. Yet even an incomplete Enigma message was precious. Every intercepted signal, every triplet of dots and dashes, was forwarded to Bletchley Park. There, in rooms crowded with filing cabinets, cigarette smoke, and the relentless clatter of electromechanical bombers, the fight for the Atlantic continued day and night. When the fragment arrived in Hut 8, the analysts immediately recognized a potential clue. Though incomplete, the message contained a metadata header, an indicator revealing which U-boat group it belonged to. It was from a formation operating far west of the usual hunting grounds, near a patch of ocean where weather was notoriously unstable and aircraft coverage was rare. This alone would have raised eyebrows. But the analysts noticed something even more alarming. The message appeared to reference rendezvous instructions for multiple submarines. This was not a routine status update. This was movement, coordinated movement, of a scale that suggested a major operation. But without the daily Enigma key, the full contents remain hidden. At that time, Bletchley Park was struggling to break the naval key for February. The Germans had introduced new procedures, expanded their use of Fragment machines, and increased radio discipline. Each change, individually, was manageable. Together, they formed a barrier that even the best cryptographers had difficulty breaching. But the fragment acted like a thread sticking out of a tightly woven cloth. If the cryptanalysts could pull on that thread hard enough, perhaps the entire code would loosen. Bill Tutt, a brilliant young mathematician, suggested an unorthodox approach. Rather than running the bomb machines through the usual set of likely rotor positions, He proposed expanding the search to include combinations typically considered improbable. It would take longer, perhaps all night, but the fragment structure hinted that this effort was not only worthwhile but urgent. And so the machines hummed. Rotor wheels spun. Electrical contacts clicked. Operators fed punch paper into the machines, tracked partial matches, and adjusted settings under the watchful eyes of senior analysts. Hours passed. Outside, the temperature dropped. Frost formed on the windows. In the huts, mugs of tea cooled beside engineers scribbling calculations. The operators, mostly young women from the Women's Royal Naval Service, worked in shifts, their hands moving quickly over switches and cables. They understood the stakes. Every minute mattered. Somewhere in the North Atlantic, a convoy loaded with fuel, food, and ammunition, Convoy HX-229, was pushing northeast, unaware that a trap might be closing around it. Then, at 3:12 a.m., the breakthrough came. A bell rang, quiet but unmistakable, from one of the bombers. Then another. 2 possible matches. Then a third. The room fell silent. Analysts gathered around as the machine spit out its potential rotor settings. The cryptographers hurried to test them against known cribs, predictable words believed to appear in German messages, such as wetter, weather, or Einsatz, operation. The text began to resolve. Letters aligned. Words appeared. Within minutes, the incomplete fragment had become a complete message, and its contents were devastating. Donitz had ordered more than 20 U-boats from 3 separate wolfpacks, Raubgraf, Sturmer, and Dranger, to converge on a specific point in the mid-Atlantic. Their target, Convoy HX-229, scheduled to pass through that exact location within hours. This was not merely a patrol. This was an orchestrated ambush on a scale the Allies had not seen before. If the convoy continued on its present course, the result would be catastrophic. The decrypted message was marked Ultra, a code word indicating the highest level of intelligence, and rushed to the Western Approaches Command in Liverpool. There, in a dimly lit operations room filled with enormous wall charts and rows of telephones, officers plotted the projected positions of the U-boats. The picture that emerged was terrifying. The wolfpacks were arrayed in a long, curved line stretching across the convoy route like a net. Once HX-229 sailed into the trap, the submarines would launch attacks from both sides, overwhelming the escorts and sinking ship after ship in the dark. It was exactly the kind of blow Donitz had hoped would cripple Allied supply lines. But now, the Allies knew. The challenge was deciding how to respond. If they rerouted the convoy too dramatically, the Germans might suspect that Enigma had been compromised. That could prompt them to change procedures or introduce new security measures, potentially locking the Allies out of their naval communications for months. If they moved too little, the convoy would die. The solution was a subtle one: alter HX-229's course just enough to steer it around the Wolfpack's formation, while maintaining a route that looked plausible to German observers. Escort commanders were informed of the change using highly restricted channels. No unnecessary radio chatter was permitted. The convoy never knew the truth. Meanwhile, in the cold waters of the mid-Atlantic, the Wolfpacks waited. The U-boats submerged and listened. Hydrophones were manned. Torpedoes loaded. Deck guns prepared. Many commanders believed HX-229 was already within detection range. They had rehearsed attack plans. They had coordinated their positions. All that remained was to strike. But dawn came, and the horizon was empty. No sound of engines. No silhouettes of merchant ships. No echo of screws on hydrophones. Confusion spread. Some captains assumed the convoy had been delayed by weather. Others moved north or south, hoping to regain contact. A few surfaced to get a better view, scanning the endless grey waves for any sign of smoke or mast. But the sea remained silent. Hours turned into days. U-boats burned precious fuel crisscrossing empty ocean. Their carefully planned trap had failed completely. HX-229, meanwhile, passed far to the south, untouched, unthreatened, and blissfully unaware of the disaster that had nearly befallen it. When the convoy reached Britain days later, the sailors celebrated a successful crossing. They had seen no U-boats, no torpedo wakes, no explosions in the night. To them, it had been an uneventful voyage. But in intelligence rooms across Britain, there was quiet satisfaction. The system had worked. Ultra had done its job. This was more than the salvation of a single convoy. It marked a turning point. By late spring of 1943, Allied command had gained increasing confidence in Ultra intercepts. Improved radar, escort carriers, long-range aircraft, and new weapons like the Hedgehog mortar all contributed to growing U-boat losses. But intelligence, the ability to see wolfpacks forming before they struck, was the real key. That February intercept became the model for future operations. Convoys were routed away from danger again and again. U-boats increasingly found themselves searching empty oceans, burning fuel, missing targets, and returning home without success. Donitz began to worry. His once lethal fleet was being outmaneuvered, not by fleets of battleships, but by mathematics, patience, and the quiet brilliance of codebreakers. By the end of 1943, U-boat morale collapsed. By 1944, the German Navy struggled to maintain operational strength. By 1945, the U-boat threat had all but vanished. But the sailors of HX-229 never knew any of this. They never knew how a single fragment of a message, cut off mid-transmission and nearly discarded, had been the key to their survival. They never knew about the sleepless night in Hut 8, or the frantic calculations, or the young women who kept the bombers running hour after hour. They never knew about the officers in Liverpool who made one of the most delicate navigational decisions of the war. They simply sailed on. Today, the story of that intercepted signal remains one of the lesser-known victories of the Second World War. There are no monuments to it, no battlefield cemeteries, no memorial plaques. It was a victory won in quiet rooms, not on open seas. A victory of intellect over brute force. A victory of the unseen over the visible. Yet its impact was immense. It protected thousands of lives. It preserved the flow of supplies that Britain needed to survive. It kept open the corridor through which American armies, tanks, aircraft, and food would later pour into Europe. And it showed, more clearly than any other event, that the war in the Atlantic would not be won solely by ships and guns, but by information, by understanding the enemy's mind before he ever struck. One message, one key, one decision, and the tide of the Atlantic began to turn.